Moto Racer World Tour is an arcade-style racing game that was released for the PlayStation in 2000 and was published by Infogrames. This would also be the third and final entry of the Moto Racer series to be released on the PlayStation in general, that offers up a variety of unique championship and gameplay modes and follows the popular lineage of the previous two titles in the series that were among some of the best arcade racers on the system at that time. And while the game does offer more in terms of various dynamics, even with the visuals, as out of the three games, this is possibly the most visually impressive game of the three available, but it does change up the dynamics somewhat in terms of the control systems and how the game portrays itself overall. As yes, while at its heart it's still considered as an arcade racer, but in many instances you can't help but notice that the gameplay style is very, very different from that of the original two games. The original two games were very, very fast paced, very frantic. They had more open-ended tracks, whereas this game tries to take on more of a realism or realistic role, as the tracks are more congruent with more circuit focused tracks that you would be more familiar with real life arenas and environments. And the same even goes for the likes of the off-road events, because it still maintains the different game modes from the previous two titles by being able to race as superbikes and as scramblers. But the control systems in both versions are very, very different, as it tries to diversify and also tries to tighten up the handling physics in many regards. Now, it's not to say that it's a bad thing. As with every sequel, there's obviously going to be some sort of evolution with regards to gameplay mechanics, but having played the game myself, and it's apparent with the likes of the reviews that I've seen that you can find online, the game, even though it's a sequel, it doesn't necessarily feel like a sequel in many ways, and it also lacks the addition of Moto Racer 2's track editor, which was one of its highlight features, so you don't have that ability to be able to create your own customized tracks and features. So they've removed that entirely in favour of a more realistic approach, which I can understand in many respects, but I can't help but feel that they have removed many of the elements and gameplay styles that made the first two games in the series as good as they were. Like, I myself personally owned Moto Racer 2, and I played Moto Racer 1 not too long after it. I originally played it on a demo, and I have to say they're among my favourite racers on the PlayStation. I love the graphical style. Yes, they were fairly early games on the system, but they were very bright, very vibrant. They were just fantastic looking games for their time. They really were, and among some of the best visually impressive games on the PlayStation. And the third game definitely matches up to that regard and keeps with that same premise, even though it goes for a more realistic take. But even though it's essentially an arcade racer, you can't help but feel that it feels, or what they were trying to do is add more simulation elements to it. That's what it feels like in most regards, as even on the easiest difficulties, this game is tough, I'm not going to lie, and especially on the off-road elements, especially on certain tracks, there's a very good chance, even from the time I spent playing it, I could not win a race on the off-road tracks at all. I found it extremely difficult, because as soon as you crash, which you will crash a lot, you just are so far behind that the computer AI is so aggressive, they're literally lapping you within no time at all. You can't catch up with them. You either have to be really good or you have to rely on luck to have any sort of a chance, but I couldn't see that when I was playing it. The only chance I had of winning races was literally in the superbike races, but even at that they were quite difficult, because even the sense of speed, while it is a fast paced game, it doesn't have the same insane or frantic levels of speed that you would have seen in the previous two games. Overall, it seems to have been toned down a lot to focus more on realism rather than arcade aesthetics. That's what it just feels like from my perspective. Now, some of you guys might disagree with that, but I can't help but feel that they took away the core identity of the original two games in favour of a different approach. And in many ways, I can probably see why this would inevitably be the end of the series after that wouldn't reappear until modern systems with Moto Racer 4, which, for all intents and purposes, there was a couple of other games that were released on the PlayStation 4 under different names, and they were just rehashed editions of that game, and they're okay. They're not great, if I'll be honest. They're mediocre at best. Like, they're playable and you can get some enjoyment out of them, but they're just very difficult, and just they use rubber banding techniques with the computer AI, and it can lead to a very frustrating experience, and it just feels like you're running around in circles just trying to do the same thing over and over again. It just feels like the same game you're playing. There wasn't really much, in my opinion, much of an effort with Moto Racer 4, because it was just working off a similar format seen in other games. So So to bring a game series back, it could have been a lot better. Let's just leave it at that. But I think had Motor Racer World Tour kept on the same aesthetic seen in Motor Racer 1 and 2, I think it would have done a lot better. I genuinely think it would have been a better overall game. Now, it's not to say that this game is bad at all. If anything, because there's so little in terms of the amount of motorbike racing games on the PlayStation in general. Because when you have the likes of, say, the Motor Racer series, you have Road Rash and maybe a couple of others, Motor Racer World Tour is still among the top 5 racing games on the system. So that'll tell you the level of the amount of games that are available with regards to motorbikes on the console, because most racing games out there don't fully expose themselves just to solely motorbikes. Motorbikes are usually added in as an additional feature or an additional vehicle that you can race as, but not solely focused around that one unique type. So it is slim pickings with regards to the games that are out there, but I'm not going to sit here and slate this game and say that it's bad, because it's not. It is a genuinely good racer, but it's definitely a lot more difficult, and it feels very different from the original games. And for me, I just feel like it's lost some of its spark that the first 2 games had, which is a pity. But at the same time, I can see the direction where things were going, because as with every situation, as with every franchise, there has to be some form of evolution at some point. Good or bad, it's going to happen regardless. It's very, very hard for developers to want to keep the same aesthetic in many ways without changing something or ruining something. But aside from that, if you want those features, just go back and play the first 2 games. But only play this if you have more of an idea or a determination to want to try and finish it. But I'll leave that up to you. But it's still a decent game in its own right. It's still a very good solid racer. It's still actually one of the best visually impressive racing games, I must admit, on the system, hands down. So that on its own merit warrants a playthrough in all respects, but regardless of what people say or regardless of the reviews, just know that it's not going to play like the original 2 Motor Racer games. It is a very, very different experience altogether. But I still would recommend that you check it out just to see what you think for yourself. But aside from that, I would love to know your thoughts on Motor Racer World Tour for the PlayStation, if you have played it yourself, and if so, what do you think of the game overall? Do you like the game, or would you prefer the previous 2 games in the series overall? I would love to hear your thoughts of this game, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. And if you would like to see more content around other motorbike racing games that I have covered on the channel, you can check out the playlist on screen to see more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.